The legislation will end Ottawa's unilateral authority over First Nations education, while requiring First Nations communities and parents to assume responsibility and accountability for the education their children receive.
On February 7, Stephen Harper unveiled the new version of the First Nations Education Act, which is now known as First Nations Control over First Nations Education. And although the new bill comes with an additional $2 billion of funding, it still remains contentious.
The biggest thing I think that is disconcerting is the fact that they're now calling it the First Nations Control of First Nations Education. If that's not a spin from the federal government, I've never seen one. This is one that is for the ages as far as I'm concerned, because there's no proof that it actually offers any control to Native people. That is one that is just I think mind-blowing for a lot of people. We're starting to hear from other communities who are saying the same thing. So lots of concern, obviously, for the First Nations that don't have a lot. They're seeing a big carrot being dangled with over $1 billion, and that's something that can't be ignored.
Although the AFN seems to have their fair share of supporters, some are challenging that it doesn't reflect how chiefs from across the country actually feel.
The bigger shock or the bigger concern is Chief Atleo and the level of participation that AFN seems to be taking on this, because is that the direction that the chiefs wanted in December? That might be a little bit of a question that has to be answered. I guess at a certain point, Chief Atleo and the AFN will have to answer that. I mean, they do have some points that they had to consider, whether or not they followed that. And I guess really the thing that was a little bit concerning is the fact that the chiefs and the communities across the country really didn't know this was coming. There was no heads up from the AFN to say, get ready guys, we think we've got something here, and watch this. It was kind of like everybody was surprised. It was like, there's an announcement tomorrow, watch it. And then to see it unfold like that was kind of disconcerting. I think the Conservatives, in their own way, did some brilliant work by spinning the title and having the AFN chief making the announcement, standing by his side, and all the pomp and ceremony that went with it. So there's a lot of work that has to be done, and for those who aren't happy, well, I guess we'll see what will happen.
Kahnawake Mohawk Immersion School Principal Gunasoho Deer says the federal government needs to be reminded not to meddle in First Nations business. This includes education.
We're in a time where the most important thing that we have is education, because education is power. So now that taken into consideration, when we talk about our own education system, what has to happen is that we will craft the education system that we want. With all the supports, financial, whatever it is, we just go to our brothers and sisters that came across the salt water that have the house now on Parliament Hill and say, this is what it is. You have the control over all the mines and the resources that you have become wealthy over. So now, help us. This is what we want. Don't interfere. We can talk and we can consult and we can negotiate, but you're not going to have the upper say. Now, when we look at what has transpired, it's safe to say again that they're meddling in our internal affairs, and they don't have no right to do that. And if we were to say, well, what is the basis of that? Well, I would always go back to Swanta, which essentially is the Two-Rome Wampum Treaty Belt that talks about what is this relationship supposed to be, which is essentially that they are in a ship with sails, we are in a canoe, we travel the river of life together. We're not going to try to steer or legislate over each other, but if something happens where we in the canoe are doing something that's affecting them in their boat or vice versa, then there was protocol. The protocol would be that, all right, now whoever the heads of state are, that we would sit, we would discuss, we would smoke the peace pipe, and we would talk about the issues of concern using the power of peace, friendship, and a good mind to resolve the issue.
And making good is what Harper is trying to do. But even with the promise of more money, not everyone is buying it.
Just putting some money there and them meddling in, like it's the same old thing all over again, but it's kind of smokescreen because, well, they think that, well, we're going to give you this money and it's going to be, you know, a means to an end. And it's not always like that, you know. They talk about, you know, what happened with the whole residential school system. So sure, there's some people that were compensated, but there's still all that pain that it doesn't resolve that. Money doesn't fix it.
A huge concern from First Nations is the lack of consultation from the federal government.
If we look at, to my knowledge, on what I've known so far, is there was approximately 5 communities that were consulted. They had a website that you can go to and you could put your concerns on there that was open to everybody. So to say that that was deemed consultation is a farce.
I think in the first line of their press release, they say after unprecedented consultation. That's a crock. There certainly wasn't any among any, certainly not in Kahnawake there wasn't, and we sent a letter to the Prime Minister about this whole issue back in November. They didn't even so much as send a response to say, we received your letter and filed it. Nothing of that sort. Certainly the Iroquois Caucus was here last week, and none of those communities were asked what they thought of it. So that is why they also sent a rejection. They signed a rejection last week. So there's a lot going on here, and it's going to take a little while to unfold the mess and then see where First Nations are going to go with this. Because like I said, there's obviously some good. There's a lot of money that seems to be attached that's much needed. And there are communities, let's face it, that need help in education, but at what cost?
Deere says Kahnawake stands against the bill and will defend the uniqueness of its own school system.
Well, because it's an education system that has, first and foremost, the parents, you know, as the guiding force about what our education should be. And then with the team of people that we have from all the different cross-sections of our community. So when we look at that knowledge and that expertise, and then again, as I said, with the history and everything that has happened, we are posed to take this leadership issue to the max. And for me, this is the greatest opportunity and the greatest time to be in because of all the things that are now starting to coalesce. And, you know, great for Kahnawake.
Concerns still remain, and many First Nations communities across Canada are still not endorsing the proposed legislation. Reporting for the Kahnawake Mohawk TV network, I'm Regan Jacobs.